So welcome back to the show. Let's talk more about this whole incident that happened to the people of the Volta region. Now, Ghana Education Service says it has started, school has resumed in 81 out of the number of schools that had to suffer by not going to school as a result of the spillage. Now, how do we ensure that they starting would there will be continuation in the teaching and learning, and what ought to be done to ensure that the pupils in the area as well as the students in the senior high school do not suffer greatly for that devastation that occurred there. We'll be speaking to relevant stakeholders who understand education and what has to be done for us to continue developing the children at that stage. Join us with your comment. Go onto our social media platform and leave your comment there. We'll share it with the rest of the world. But we'll be speaking to the NADMO. We'll be speaking to education enthusiasts, education analysts, as well as our reporter on the ground to gauge the mood of these areas. Carlos Caloni is on phone from the ground there. Carlos, good morning to you. You've been there all this while. You understand what's happening there. Give us a pictorial view of what exactly the situation is like in these communities.
All right, Bray. So I can say that the water has really receded, and in many of these communities, you just find, pockets of water in some of the very low-lying areas. And so life appears to be returning to normal, but still we have a lot of the flood victims in many of these shelters. For instance, in Kizito, we still have a number of them there. And also at Betipo Camp also has a number of the flood victims, as well as the RC basic school or primary school in Mepe. So it's cut across. Many of these flood victims are unable to return to their homes because their homes have been destroyed. Most of them had these mud houses and they are no more. So where to stay now is a challenge. So over the weekend, Jacob Caesar donated some, tents for the flood victims to, contain them. And at RC Basic School in Mepe, we had about 110 of such flood victims occupying the classroom. But through that donation, according to the school authorities, the flood victims will now be moved into these tents to, create a space for academic work to commence in the basic school, which is the primary school. But they still maintain that the GES is still in, flooded, and so academic work there can't commence. So across most of these shelters or the camps, school is yet to resume fully. What the MP has done in that area is to recruit some of the some volunteers to be teaching some of these affected kids. But as we speak, many of them are preparing to go back to school. So their volunteerism or whatever they've been doing to support the kids actually ended a few days ago, which means that if they are not taking these kids, many of them will be without teachers. So the classrooms are still occupied by the flood victims, and academic work is yet to fully resume in some of the schools. But I can say for the RC primary school, because of the donation of the tent, today, Monday morning, many of them are returning to their classroom break.
So you can also confirm that indeed 81 out of the schools that were affected have resumed, teaching and learning has resumed there?
Brace, I cannot confirm that because I believe what is being said is across the flood, all the areas affected by the flood. But for Mepe, I can say that the RC basic school, yes, the primary section academic work has fully, resumed this morning due to the tents there.
So what do you think, from your own observation, is or are needed to get teaching and learning back to normalcy in these areas?
All right, Brace. On the ground, you realize that many of these flood victims, where to sleep is an issue. For instance, if you go to Akosombo Basic School, it's just a few classrooms, and in one classroom you find up to over 60 people in one classroom with their personal belongings. So the whole place is choked, and so they need a place to move to so they can pave way for academic work to commence, because the students, most of them are having these classes under trees. And like I said, those who are actually been providing this free teaching and learning are volunteers who are going back to school. So what is needed now to ensure that the academic work of these students are not truncated is to ensure that a place is created for the victims to move to, so that the classrooms can be free for the students to go back to their classroom. That is crucial. That is needed as we speak, because, in fact, Brace, if you go to the community, you find many of these school kids loitering around, and it's even exposing them to a lot of danger. Yesterday, for instance, a 37-year-old woman told me she has been looking for her child for about 3 days now. You can imagine, because there's no order at this camp. So it is important that they are sent to a safer place where they can now be, and then the classrooms will be free for academic work to commence.
Mm. So you said the water has been receding. Have some of these residents started moving back to their communities yet?
Yes, indeed. Some of the residents have moved back to their homes. You recall that the UN interagency group did some work there 3 days to assess the structural integrity of those buildings that suffered the flood. And so the NADMO also carried out some fumigation exercise on some of those homes. So some of them have gone back to their houses, but many of them are still with friends and families, and some are also still at the shelters. I mean, the school serving as shelters for them.
But I mean, we were told earlier that because of the contamination, it will take some days for people to move back to their communities. How is it that just days after the water receding, people are back to the communities? Has that been sanctioned?
That has not been sanctioned. So that is the concern. If you go to the community, there are people who, I mean, in some cases, their houses have also not been fumigated, but they've moved into the homes. In fact, I spoke to one elderly man who said he waited for the fumigation to be carried out, and they never showed up. But where he was staying, one of the camps, he couldn't stay there any longer because of the conditions there. So he decided to just move in. And I can say on authority that there's one school in South Sonkomboni Vocational Technical School where my sources there have been telling me that the students are the ones doing the cleaning up of the place, the debris and all that, and they are going through a lot as we speak. And they expected either the Ghana Education Service or NADMO to carry out fumigation and cleaning of these classrooms, but the students and some staff are being made to clear these debris from their classrooms. So it's a story that cuts across many of these communities, where some residents feel like where they are staying, the shelters are not conducive enough for them to continue to stay there. So they go back to their home, tidy it up, and then they stay in. So it's not something that has been sanctioned by the National Disaster Management Organization, but based on the deplorable situation at the shelters, the individuals are now deciding to move into their homes.
Well, and what are the authorities saying about this development? Because people thought that once they move into the places without the relevant clearance, it could spark another health outbreak that we're not ready to deal with. Isn't that the case?
Indeed, Bruce, that is the case. Apart from the health crisis that this can bring about, don't forget many of these houses stayed in the water for weeks. And so the integrity of their homes would have to be ascertained to be sure that these homes will not collapse on them. But, you know, like I said, the situation is such that they don't find the shelters they are living in at times so conducive, and they also cannot wait much for the authorities to, you know, come up with whatever it is. You know, the UN Interagency Group finished its work some few days ago. It will issue its report to the Disaster Management Committee, and that will inform the way forward. But indeed, some of the homes have been fumigated, not all. So we can say to a large extent the health crisis could be managed in those areas that have been fumigated. But the concern that some of these buildings might not be safe for the residents to move into is there. But yet, because of the situation, some of them have decided to go back to their homes.
Okay. So kindly confirm for me again, how many schools have you seen reopened?
Okay, so I can confirm that the RC Basic School, the primary section in Mepe, has been reopened because of the tent provided by Jacob Caesar, which really made it possible for the school authorities to move the flood victims from the classrooms so the classrooms will be free for the students. That I can confirm that, yes, it has fully, academic work has commenced in that school.
Is it because this is a place you have contact at, or you've checked with other places to then confirm whether or not the schools are reopened?
Yeah, so I've also checked at Agbetikpo Basic School. The flood victims are still in the classroom, so academic work is yet to commence, and other communities have been to. In the Mepe, that is the North Congo area.
Okay. All right. Grateful to you. But kindly hold on for me. Let me bring in the Deputy Director of NADMO, Deputy Director General Seji Saji into this conversation. Grateful to you for joining us here. What has been the work done in preparing these schools to be reopened?
Thank you. Good morning to you and your cherished listeners. A lot has been going on since the visit of the Education Minister and his team. Basically, the Regional Directorate of the Ghana Education Service and the various district directorates of the Education Service of this affected district have been working tirelessly to make sure schools resume. In most of the districts, that has been achieved. The only challenge left is North Tongue, and even in North Tongue, some schools have reopened, but some other schools are yet to reopen because we have not successfully relocated or moved the affected persons from the classroom. We are looking at it case-by-case basis. Example is the RT school that was just mentioned in your report. There is another one, which is the Presbyterian Basic School, Presbyterian TV School, where UNICEF has donated from classroom tents. It's just that the classroom tents were not enough to move all. So some of the classrooms have been free for academic work to start. But generally speaking, I can say majority of the schools in almost all the affected districts, just at North Town, that we are having challenges. For Central Town, with the donation of this classroom tents to them, they were able to successfully complete the reopening of all schools. Now, there were some schools that were severely affected that the students cannot go back to. What the District Education Directorate did was to add them to another school, so they have two streams now. So one of the streams goes in the morning, and the second stream goes in the afternoon with the same, with the access of teachers. So the school that was severely affected, the teachers that teach that school are the ones running the afternoon session with their students, and in the morning, the regular ones go, or the original people who occupy those classrooms attend those ones.
So in total, how many schools have reopened?
I can't give you a figure offhand, but that's why I'm saying that, with the exception of North Town, in Central Town it was about 11 schools that were affected. Now all 11 schools are running now. In Shaiwosudoku, Esichari area, almost all the schools are running except one. But even that, they are running classes under trees because there's some project going on which will be completed by next week so that affected persons will move in. But classes is still going on with their regular teachers. It is the same thing with the Apetipo that was mentioned in your report. Even though the classrooms are still occupied by affected persons, some sort of classes is being run for the children under the trees and an uncompleted structure just by the side of the school.
Okay, so do I assume that that's the same situation in South Town? You've mentioned Central Town, North Town, Shaiwosudoku area. In South
Town, we don't have, all schools are running now. Okay. It was the Komboni school, which is a secondary school, but that was fumigated, I think, about a week ago, roughly within the week, the fumigation was done. And I'm told it will be open school this week, probably.
Okay. Now, we also understand that some residents have already moved into their homes. We knew that people, the sort of, anxiety that greeted the level of water, the contamination of the water in the area, and hearing that they've started to move into their homes, gets people's eyeballs raised. That, are we safe?
Well, that is true that people have started moving into their homes, but that even started quite some time ago. Immediately, the spillage stopped. The level of inundation differs from community to community. And even in the same community, the level of inundation is also differs from structure to structure. So you have some structures that are completely submerged. You have some structures that the water is at the lintel level. Some structures that the water is at the window level. Some also less than the window, just about 2 feet. Those ones that the water receded immediately after the spillage stopped, moved back into their homes. Now, even those that were completely submerged, when the water receded, some places were completely dry now. And those are the areas some fumigation was done. But there is still pools of water in the Mepe Township that we are working seriously about for 4 or 5 days now. We've been pumping water into a canal that will lead back into the river. That pumping is going on. So for returning to their homes, quite a lot of people have returned to their homes. In St. Kizito, which was the biggest holding center, now has a little over 500. It used to have about 1,500, but now has a little over 500 there. The report of UNOS, who is leading the interagency working group on emergency to do the conditional structure assessment and environmental impact analysis, finished their work about 3 weeks ago. We are receiving the report somewhere on Wednesday. Now, this will give us targeted building that some work needs to be done on before the people go back. But generally, some of the houses just need decontamination, fumigation, and the people can move back into their structures.
So again, confirm this. So, are we saying that those who have moved into their homes have been fumigated already, and that it's safe for them to live in there?
Yes, to a large extent, because we started fumigation about 2 weeks ago. We started fumigation roughly about 2 weeks ago, and quite a lot of the structures have been fumigated. But we have also indicated that if your place is not fumigated, don't move. Just draw the attention of the assembly. It will get to us, and your place will be fumigated. For example, at one of the holding centers, they have taken the decision to move the people back, but they are waiting for the fumigation to be done. We started yesterday. We are hopeful that it will be completed today. then from tomorrow or Wednesday, they can start going back into their homes.
I mean, I just got to know that your other name is Amedono. That's a beautiful name. So, Mr. Amedono, are you telling us that there's no cause for alarm?
To a large extent, yes, because of what we are engaged in. Normally, in our disaster management cycle, the recovery stage is a stage that we are very careful about so that we don't have another situation on our hands after just coming out from one.
Okay. Well, because when I saw the level of, the water in the communities, I thought I would take us some 3, 4, 6 months before these people can go back to their communities. I didn't know it could take us that very short period for them to go back.
Well, in some places, you'll be right about that. In some places, some communities were completely submerged, especially the island communities. There's even the issue of clay buildings. Some of them gave way during the inundation. Now, those people might not have a place to go back immediately. So it could take 3 months, it could take 4 months for something to be done for those people to go back. There's also a larger discussion whether they should go back to island communities that are inside the river. It's a conversation that we need to have.
So which means that there's a possibility that the island communities might not be moving back.
Yes, because the island communities, quite a lot of the structures are gone. There's a particular community in Central Town, there's only one building left. These are very small communities, and most of the structures are clay structures.
So what's the plan for such communities that may likely not be re-inhabited by the people? What's the plan for them?
Well, there's a lot of projects going on by philanthropies and private individuals. The Ministerial Committee too is also meeting to take a decision on how to proceed on such situation I have described. But in about 4 of the communities, that is Asuchari area, the Topo area, that City FM in collaboration with the cement company are putting up some structures, and they are almost about 75% complete. They are doing the same thing in Natal, and they are going to start the same thing in New Bangba, the central town, where these people can be held temporarily until such a decision that a permanent decision is taken on what to do, whether they are moving back to the island or where the structures will be staying there permanently.
But upon your own, studies, is it safe for them to move back?
Well, these are places these people have stayed all their lives. It is not an easy thing moving people from there. Maybe into the future, the solution could be those places could still be used as farmlands, because I'm told those lands there are very fertile, and that is what even attracts people to those places. So there could be some arrangement, but it's a bigger discussion that the assemblies must have.
Okay, all right then. So as we speak, you say you're receiving a report on the economic impact assessment that has been done in the areas.
That's a conditional structure integrity assessment and environmental impact assessment. We'll be receiving a report probably by Wednesday.
Okay. But is NADMO doing some works in these communities as we speak? What works are those? If they are
yes,
doing something?
we are still doing relief administration. We are still sharing items, because even when people go back to their homes, quite a number of these people have lost their livelihoods already. So government is working frantically to get them back on their feet. It will take some time. So relief administration will still continue for some time. Donations are still coming in, but not as before. But that relief administration will now move from the towns into the homes that where people have moved to. Apart from that, too, we are still doing a lot of pumping of water, especially from the Mepe Township, but there's still stagnant water that will not dry up anytime soon.
Okay. Now we saw how desperate the situation became when this flooding started. Yesterday there were some earth tremors in the capital and some part of the central region. How prepared is NADMO for earthquakes, for example, and the aftermath of earthquakes?
Well, for some time now, for some few years back, I think everybody is now aware of this, that we've been having a series of earth movements and tremor, though not too significant on the Richter scale as the experts will put it. But there are indications that there can be a possibility of an earthquake event. And if that happens, that the consequences can be very dire. In 2020, the president, as a result of what has been happening, put together a committee to come out with a framework for earthquake response for the country. Okay. Their report was presented in 2021, and some actions have already started flowing out of that report. Some gadgets have been installed in a number of public institutions, especially along the fault line, to detect this. And the Ghana Geological Survey Authority is actually the lead in this earthquake issues. But we are collaborating with them. We have started some education. UNESCO has come in at some point to help us develop some education material. Just even 2 weeks ago, there was a training workshop for our staff that are around the fault areas to continue sensitization and education. And we have actually had 2 full-scale simulation exercise on an earthquake event, which gave us a scenario of a mass casualty event. There's a football going on at the sports stadium, and this happens. How are we going to respond? We have done that with all our first-line responders. We have done that about twice.
What about the people in the areas? I mean, in terms of your simulation exercise, because when it came to the Akosombo Dam Spillage, we heard of how the simulation wasn't enough. How about people who live in these fault line, such that they also know what to do if there should be an earthquake?
Well, simulation exercise never really takes away the hazard. It only helps you to prepare and coordinate your response activity. To a large extent, the Akosombo spillage and the flooding that happened aftermath, we could say to a large extent, because we had done some level of preparation, we thank God the Almighty that we didn't have any recorded deaths as a direct result of the spillage. Okay. Because we had pre-designated havens. People know they had to move if the water came and all that. So this is what the simulation exercise does. It helps you to put yourself in readiness, but it will not take away the hazard.
Okay. So that's why I asked. You said you've done simulation with your first line responders, and I wanted to understand what about the people, ordinary people who are living along the fault line, such that they will also know what to do in case there's an earthquake.
Yeah, so that is why the education and sensitization is going on in those communities, using the assembly system and our zonal staff. NADMO is decentralized even to the zonal level. So in most electoral areas that even have assemblymen, you have NADMO staff too, also in those localities.
Okay. Now you mentioned that some devices have been installed. Were they able to pick the tremor that happened over the weekend for us to then tell that indeed these devices will help us?
Yes, it was. The Geological Survey Authority, I'm sure, has put out a statement. That is how they were able to measure the scale. I think they have put out about 3.6 on the Richter scale. So that is how they were able to measure. But normally, the devices pick these things within seconds, and the event follows.
Oh. So they are not to serve as a warning mechanism.
It is a warning mechanism. It's actually a warning mechanism that will send a signal. But action needs to be taken within a split second. Mm-hmm. I can't put out the exact time, but I know the experts have the time. But I'm told it's within some seconds or minutes that the indication will come before the event follows.
Okay. So if that's the case, where people warned that there could be a tremor like that?
But these days, a lot of education are going on around the areas where we have the fault line. A lot of education is going. A lot of activities have flown out of the framework for earthquake preparedness that was done in 2021.
Okay. Okay. But so, I mean, in terms of you, NADMO, being able to accommodate the aftermath of anything like that in terms of earthquake, we know that financially you're not sound. How prepared are you to deal with anything like that? I mean, in terms of being able to help people to go through the aftermath of an earthquake?
Well, that is normally a challenge, but our law structures our operations in such a way that the whole district assembly has a role to play when there is an emergency or a disaster. So we operate through a structure at the assembly called the District Disaster Management Committee. This committee has all the heads of the decentralized agencies as members of this committee, and the district chief executive as the chairperson. The NADMO director serves as the secretary, and the law also allows for anybody who has a role to play to be co-opted onto that committee. So what happens is that when there is an emergency, the whole resources of the assembly is at the disposal of this committee, because it is the district chief executive who can commandeer almost all the districts in the district and deploy them as well. So vehicles, in the case of the flooding issue, a lot of boats were commandeered, even from private people. So that is how our organization is structured. I mean, there is no state institution in Ghana which is self-sufficient. But what it takes for us to prepare appropriately and respond, that we are up to the task.
Okay, interesting. All right, grateful there. I had to take you to the earthquake whilst we were talking about the flooding. Grateful, but stay with me. Let me bring in my colleague Carlos Coloni again. Carlos, so you had there Mr. Amedono. I mean, I love that name, Saji Amedono, Deputy Director General of the NADMO, saying that, I mean, schools in Shai or Sudoku have all reopened except one. Schools in Central Town, all of them have reopened, and where there are difficulties, they are running shifts. I mean, even in the North Town, the Agbetikpo Basic School is, I mean, something is also ongoing there. This morning, how are the students in the schools that have reopened, where you can confirm, how are they reacting to going back to school? Do we still have Carlos Coloni?
All right, Bray.
Yeah.
Yes, please come again. I
wanted to understand how the kids are reacting to going back to school.
In fact, the excitement I saw on Saturday when it was announced to them that soon be going back to their classroom. It's something that cannot be described. They've had the classes under the trees for a number of weeks now. And so after they had those tents and the assistant headmaster of the school told them Monday morning they are going back to their classroom, they were really, really, really excited, especially at the RC primary school. So I can say for a fact that across these schools, many of the students who have been having their classes under trees are really not happy with the situation because of the low level of concentration. There are flood victims on at the camp, and so they are unable to concentrate. So knowing now that they are going back into their classroom, they are happy. And apart from even the students, the teachers themselves are happy that they are really going back to normal.
Mm. Well, what about, the BC, WAEC has released BC results. Have you picked anything on that as well?
Well, I tried speaking to the North Songo Director of Education, and the indication I got was that they will speak to the issue this week so they can really establish how they fared in the BC results. So we are yet to get update on that particular bit of it.
Okay. All right then. But what about senior high schools? Have they also resumed, those who were affected?
Well, for the Kizito Senior High School, you do know that particular school is serving as a shelter for the flood victims. So they are yet to resume, and that's the more reason why the traditional leaders and as well as the leaders in the community are pushing for a quick relocation of the flood victims from the school so that they can fully resume. My last interaction with the DCE for the North Song area, Divine Fenum, he indicated to me that plans were far advanced to actually move these remaining flood victims from St. Kizito so they can pave way for full academic work to resume at that particular school. But other senior high schools in the area that have not been affected, they are, going back, especially like the Komboni, which is in the South Song district. They are resuming school this week, hopefully.
Okay, all right. Mr. Saji, once life is gradually returning to normalcy, what do people need now to resettle in their homes, such that if people still want to come to their aid, they will know exactly what are needed?
The livelihood of the affected persons is also an issue, and it will take a long time for these people to get back on their feet and continue with what they were doing before the emergency. So it is still relief support, both food and non-food items, that will go a long way to assist these people, and that we are also doing, and it is going to continue for some time.
Okay, all right. Back to the earthquake story. Let me ask you this: what advice will you give to people now that we've started experiencing some tremors? What would be your advice, as in something more of a proactive measure, so that even if it happens, the major one happens, we might not have a lot of impact going out of our hands?
Well, already there is an issue along where we have the fault line, which has been heavily developed. That's a serious issue already. But there are some things that are to be done as soon as an earthquake event occurs. Our staff are going around. The Geological Service Authority is also doing some form of education. And I think very soon there's some plan to get even media houses involved so that kind of education can be going out. Those who are putting up structures or who continue to put up structures in those areas, the normal processes of permitting, going through the assembly before you start any construction must be followed. The assemblies have a certain structure. They normally even check before a permit is issued. But you know our challenges already. So the advice is that those who continue to put up structures must try as much as possible to get to the assemblies and go through the assembly bylaws before they embark on such endeavors.
But haven't the assemblies been the same people who have looked on for these developments to spring up along the fault line? How can we then still trust that they can help us do a better job?
Well, it's a general problem of law enforcement in our country. Until that improves, we'll still continue having these issues.
Yes, but these all assemblies that we have to go for permitting because we want them to help us are the ones looking on for people to build in these areas. So my question is, how can we still trust the same people to help us prevent these calamities should an earthquake like that happen?
We have engaged assemblies a lot through our disaster management committee for them to make sure their bylaws work. As part of building capacity, because in disaster management, the more capacity you have, the less vulnerable you are. So the only way, as for disasters, we cannot eradicate disasters at all. But we can always build capacity so that our vulnerability will be reduced. So that when it happens, loss to life and property will be very minimal. And at the center of this is enforcing our own bylaws at the various assemblies.
I mean, you are worried about how these places have developed, right? Looking at that, if there should be an earthquake today, how devastating will it be? Looking at how we are building and developing along the fault line.
Well, the last earthquake that caused some damage in Accra was somewhere in the 1930s. That was the last one, and at that time, the level of development in Accra was very minimal. And even that, we have some buildings go down, and we had cracks in quite a lot of buildings. Now that we have structures everywhere, I can only imagine what will happen if we have an earthquake of a very significant dimension on the Richter scale.
I mean, being the proactive person you are in your position, what would be your recommendation as to how we can prevent that from happening? People are developing. What must we do? What do you think must happen?
Well, for us, we are a coordinating agency. We coordinate response activities before, during, and after every emergency. Our work starts with mitigation through preparedness, response, and recovery. We can only do this within the structures or the existing laws of this country. So every agency, every unit has a role to play for us to be safe. It is not only the prerogative of the disaster of the National Disaster Management Organization to make the country safe. It is everybody's responsibility. And that has always been our mantra, that disaster management is everybody's responsibility. So
yes, it is everybody's responsibility. What must happen? What must we all do?
Law enforcement. Law enforcement. Apart from law enforcement, what we do now is to make sure we carry out sensitization and education, and at the same time develop preparedness plans so that in the unlikely event that an emergency happens, we already have some protocols to follow to bring some coordinated efforts to the response.
Okay. My final question to you, if someone is new in the city, where are these fault lines? Where should people be aware that if I live here, it's possible that if there's a tremor or an earthquake, I'll be affected?
Well, it's more on the Makati area, even towards the parts of the Ebri area. The Ghana Geological Survey Authority has exact definition of the areas, but on top of my head, these are some of the places that have always been experiencing these tremors.
Okay, all right. Mr. Ahmed Donu Sejisaji, Deputy Director General of Technical and Reforms at NADMO, I'm grateful to you that you got the time to be with us, but kindly hold it for me. Let me bring in Maxwell Lukuto, who is NDC parliamentary candidate-elect for South Tong. He's on the ground now, so he could help us with more info. Mr. Lukuto, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. What's happening in South Tong as we speak in relation to the, the aftermath of the spillage of the Akosombo Dam?
Yeah, sure. So after the fallout of the spillage and the accompanying destruction that we saw, schools had to take a break, especially the Combo Tech and then the primary school or the basic school. They had their compound and their classrooms in the flood. So water went into the classrooms and the whole compound was flooded. The school park, everything was just flooded. And so they had to take a break. After a little while, there was an arrangement from the Ghana Education Service for them to run shifts with the Presbyterian Basic School. And so students of the Presby School will go in the morning between 6 in the morning and 12, and then students from the Komboni Basic School will take over from 12 to 5 o'clock in the evening. So they had been doing that for some time until now that GES is directing that they go back to their place. As much as I'm aware, about 2 weeks ago, there was some fumigation exercise on the school compound. And there were some controversy over whether Zoomlion was doing it as a corporate social responsibility or it was a contract from VRA or from government or from whoever. We have not seen exactly what it is yet, though, but there was some fumigation exercise about 2 weeks ago. What we see on campus is that because the water filled with a lot of debris went into the classroom, there was a need for them to do a lot of cleaning on the floor. And so for the past 2 weeks, some students who are in Akosombo Township were called by the school to come over to help with the cleaning exercise, scrape up the mud in the classrooms and all that. That they have done also for about a week now. And so today, officially, they will be going back to campus. And I'm sure the process will continue with the cleaning. What is evident on ground is that most of the painted buildings which were submerged in the mud or in the flooded water has reached there. Immediately, no arrangement has been made for that. And that would be the critical issue to look at going forward.
Okay. So you can confirm that schools have resumed in South Tong, right?
Yes.
And the situation is a bit normal there?
Yeah, the water has receded completely from these classrooms and the whole compound. It's gone back to its normal level in the Volta River. And so everything is back to its normal state, except the aftermath effect that we are describing.
So there's no school that hasn't reopened. All schools have reopened in South Tong, right?
No, the fact is that it's not all schools in South Tong that went on the break.
Okay.
It was only the school that was affected. That's what I mentioned, that the Kinibeto Basic School and then the Vocational Training School. You know, these two schools are closer to the substation, the ECG substation that so got submerged because of their closeness to the canal that takes water from the Volta River to the Gatco farms. So it was a spillover from that canal that affected these schools because of how close they are to the canal. And so this is the only school that actually got closed down because their compound was flooded. It was not all schools in South Home that got flooded. It was this particular school. So that was the only one that was made with the Presby Basic School for them to be running shifts until this morning that the Quinibeto Basic School and then the vocational school are supposed to report back to campus.
Okay. All right. Thanks for this particular update. Is there anything you would want NADMO specifically to do to help residents as they try to reintegrate back into their communities?
Immediately, the immediate need for most people in the district and the constituency is drinking water, because we can't be too sure of the portability of the water we take. So even as an individual receiving some relief and samples of people, late last week I had to arrange for some bags of sachet water to be sent to this particular school we are talking about, especially those that have to be brought back to campus to help in the cleaning exercises and all that. And so I'm sure they will still need potable drinking water like the sachet water. And then they should be able to help them rethink the school, because sincerely, if they would have to continue living and studying under the conditions which the classrooms are, fine, there has been fumigation, but I believe that the painting has to be done. I was called upon the last time, and I'm yet to get to the school, maybe before close of day today or tomorrow, so that we'll think together to see how we can help them in the classroom. So if NADMO has anything to do to be me, because we will have to restore this classroom to say they were in before the floods took over, so that we can have conducive environment for these little ones to continue their education.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to you. Maxwell Lukoto is the NDC parliamentary candidate-elect for South Tone. Well, Mr. Seji, grateful to you for having time for us here. But listening to Mr. Lukoto, is there anything you want to add in terms of specifically to South Tone?
No, just to add that, I'm sure there's going to be just this weekend. The water is quite up after that, so this weekend
Mr. Saji, I'm getting some sort of feedback from where you are now.
Okay, is it okay now?
Okay, yes.
Yes, so I'm just saying that we are still going ahead with our relief administration. Water was a major issue, so we deployed quite a number of tankers to be helping with water and did a lot of distribution of sachet water. That is still ongoing. Even this weekend, we did at least about 2,000 sachet bags of water to South and Don. So you should be rest assured that we are still continue with the relief administration.
All right. So they will still be getting the water, right?
Yes, yes.
All right. I'm grateful to you. Seji Saji Amedonu is Deputy Director General of the NADMO, the National Disaster Management Organization. You're still watching the AM show, and we're talking about the aftermath of the flooding of some part of the Volta region and Greater Accra region, as well as the Eastern region, from the spillage of the Akosombo Dam. We understand that some schools are reopened, and NADMO has given us confirmation that a lot of schools have reopened, and that in South Sudoku, all the schools have reopened except 1 or 11 schools. In South Central Town, all schools have reopened as well. All right, let's still stay on the subject and bring in Engineer Abdullahi Mahama to look at rebuilding the communities now that the water is receding. He is a road and building consultant. Engineer, good morning. Thanks for joining us. What must be the focus as we try to rebuild these communities after this very tough time?
So let me say a very good morning to your cherished viewers. And I'll go ahead to go and borrow one of the statements that the Minister of Power or Energy, Mama Toko Kupempe, made at the floor of Parliament last week. The water levels, when they receive other information that they are getting some more water, there's likelihood of another spillage. And so I'm sure that the government or the people will not behave like ostriches. We will have to now be faced with reality that as at November, almost 10th of November, 11th of November, we are still receiving rains even in the capital to a certain level of precipitation. So you can imagine what is happening in the forest areas and then up there in the northern savanna areas. So in as much as we are faced with this, we should know that once we don't have control over the ozone layer or the climate change, we can just bear with, every Ghanaian understand that the pattern of the weather has changed drastically. So we're coming to receiving some of these things almost every now and then. So what I would suggest is that, in fact, I was listening to you in the last 1 hour when you made mention of the fact that the United Nations aid or something have gone to conduct a lot of the structural integrity analysis tests, which is like one of the best requirements. In fact, one of the good news I've heard. Of course, last week when I was in your institution, I think we projected that this is what the institution have to carry out before people move into their building, especially with the storage buildings, like maybe 2-floor, 3-floor, for the public areas. Domestic ones are also very important, but you know that the magnitude of disaster in a public area would always surpass that of a domestic house. So even though every life matters, first concentration has to go to where we have a lot of concentrated people: schools, churches, clinics, hospitals, or any event centers must be the first priority, where you have a lot of gatherings, and then we look at the domestic. Unfortunately, as I preempted the last time, most of the mud houses are already gone. It will be an advice that if the chiefs have some lands which are relatively higher in terms of elevation, then we may have to start this resettlement. I've seen some of the media who are doing a lot in trying to get a lot of Ghanaians to contribute their quota to have new resettlement plans. So we have to look at first elevated areas which are higher, and at least now they have an idea where the elevated areas are because of the rain that came. You know definitely that some areas never flooded. If those areas have not been developed, then it means that concentration has to go to those areas, and they will have a well-planned design and well-planned educated house, so that even though we have a lot of population sitting at one location, but because it's properly planned and maybe you have 2-3 story and 2-3 story building, it means that you can accommodate a lot of people, and then the other lands will be possibly be left for agro purposes. If there's no option, what I see that I think viewers would know, if you have been using cantonment and rage, you notice that the old colonial buildings were actually suspended. They don't put the concrete on the ground. They actually suspend them with pillars. If you go to rage, you see some of them. You go to cantonment, you see some of them. If there's, in fact, the cost will be relatively higher than the normal. But if you look at the fact that you are going to do an excavation, you do your block work, you come and put in the soil, the sand to be able to get to the concrete level, it might not be that bigger when you isolate your buildings with columns and you lift up maybe above 1 meter. In the event where we are not doing massive spillage and it becomes necessary that water would have to flow through these areas, then those buildings will come in handy, because almost all of them are suspended. But that means that it has to be with cost. Conscious design has to go into it. The consideration will be that we are having low-lying areas, and people still want to stay in their locality because of maybe close proximity to their farm areas or wherever they are working. And so we can start to do new designs and lifting up these buildings. And then having an idea that the buildings may not just be maybe 1 story or 2 story. So the design must have the design concept of maybe continuation of the building. So let's say if you can do 20 buildings now, and instead of making them lateral on the ground, you can do about 5, but they'll be suspended on ground, first and second. That means that you have made use of a good chunk of the land. So you can go vertically than going laterally on the land, so that you don't actually abuse or exhaust the high-level area that may be smaller than the low-lying area, which is vast. So these are the few things that I think that, with the exception of the EPA that you have spoken about, those who have to do the fumigation and things, These are the things that we have to look at in the buildings. And then some of the buildings may have been so saturated, gone beyond the saturation point, that possibly those who didn't have, which were constructed with concrete blocks, like there was no corridors blocks, so their level of saturation will be higher than that of the corridors blocks. And the fact that some of them may not have plastered, because once you plaster a building with a very fine material, you are actually preventing high infiltration or percolation of water into the building. So some of the buildings, like you said, when they run all this structural integrity analysis, they were able to come good with it. So moving forward, no building should be left unplastered. And most of the buildings should have at least concrete block, corridor blocks, which will be for the foundation, so that they can resist a lot of this soaking or dampness, and their strength are much higher than that of the concrete block. So I'm sure a lot of associations or these companies who have gone into this construction, they have the engineers like myself who would give these solutions. But we have to move towards the high areas and then plan and suspend the buildings higher. And I think we can still say that even in the event that the flat town area about 1.52 meters, there will be adequate canoes to run around if that becomes necessary, so that at least the buildings may still be cohabited, but you can still move around when the event of the stream spillage that was received in this year, as we have all witnessed across these areas, 9 communities, 9 districts that have been affected by this.
Well, but in a country where the simplest of things are not being done, I mean, building permits being granted to people to build in a certain way, even that we have a challenge with it. Whose responsibility is it then to ensure that its proposal is adhered to? Is it the builder, I mean the individual who's building, or is it the government, the assembly, to ensure that these are done?
It will go straight to the assembly. When the assembly decides. In fact, let me be frank with an observation I've made over the few years especially. There are a lot of the buildings that I've seen in question mark areas. And when we dig deep, you get to know that they don't have permit, because no sound engineer at the local assembly who has all the evidence or all the knowledge will just give permits to buildings that will be sited in the areas which will be inundated by floodwaters, or even river, when the rivers are flowing along and beyond their bank within communities, just like what is happening around the Tetegu area. Most of those buildings do not have permits. In rare occasions, you see 1 or 2 of them having permits. So if they don't have the permit, then the onus lies on the same assembly to hold the bull by the horn. Because I have said it countless times that there are a lot of acts, the law, the power that gives the assembly all the liberty to ensure that they carry out instant prohibition, alteration, abatement of destruction of demolition of those structures. So we are rather ignoring the basic things that would have done. And then when the disaster comes, then government has now entered and used the scarce resource to have done something that would have been for expansion of a development. Rather, we are using those monies to solve very basic things that the assemblies could have done. You see, we shouldn't be, if you say government, we should zero it to the community. I've said that our land tenure system is still not an excuse for bad development. You may own your land as a chief or as a developer, whatever it is, and then the assembly has the power to do what we call zoning. When the assembly zones an area, that this area is for mini industrial hub, you cannot go there and do a residential apartment. If they zone an area and say that this is a residential apartment or a residential area, you cannot go into that sector of the land and start to do industrial hub or industrial construction. And when they say that this area, per the information or the evidence that are available to us, we cannot develop here for habitation. So even though you may own your land, you cannot sidestep the law. So the assembly has so much power that they are not abusing you, but your land is on flooding line in a low-lying area, which becomes the receptor of all floodwaters. So we will not give you any permit to construct a building. In the event where it becomes so critical that that person wants to carry the development in that way, either way, There are other options in the law, the Act, that gives the developer that if you want to do your development here, then you have to do what we call flood control measures, as enshrined in the Act. And these are all basic laws that are found at the shelf of the Assembly. When you look at the Land Use and Special Plan of 2006, that 925, it's so powerful. And look at the National Body of Regulation, which has been amended to 6425, it's so explicit that if you have to develop that said land, we don't have a problem. But we will now give you a design that will take off all the water in that particular area, not to somebody's land, but to a reasonable discharge point. Once you're able to do that, and it will not affect any other person's development, whatever it is, you're allowed to construct your building. That means that you have met all the engineering criteria enshrined in the Act. And these are there. But the only thing is that, like you and I know, the Assembly should lift the level high, and then they should have minimum interference from the politicians. The Assembly should work to get us where we are supposed to be.
I mean, these same laws also allow the assemblies to then decide not to give permit to someone to build in a certain locality. But we know how people are building in waterways and water views in our communities.
Yes.
Do you really trust that the assemblies can do this? I mean, if there's a record which you're looking at.
Yes.
There's what we have to do to ensure that we minimize the impact of flooding if ever it will happen again in future. Do you trust on the face of the record that in fact these assemblies can really do this work?
If you listen to what I just said, I think the last statement I made was that if politicians would allow.
No, I got that part, but are you saying that all of these people building in unauthorized places are influenced by politicians?
No. So the Assembly, we know the Assembly will always come out with about 4 things or 3.
Yeah.
Mostly they say they are under-resourced. If you have listened to this jingle almost all the time, the Assembly will tell you that we are under-resourced to have 1, vehicles that we can use to move to these areas which are fast developing. 2, we don't have fuel. And 3, we don't have a constituted task force.
Okay.
Because when they have to go and carry out in the law, the Act 121, that gives them the power to carry out instant prohibition or demolition of structure which are considered as nuisance in the environment. They need a task force. That task force has to be paid by the Assembly. So that when they move to these areas, because they are well organized, not armed, they can move into these areas. And once they have been, the engineers have identified building A, building B, building C to be an obstacle to a flow of water or any other thing for that matter, they don't have permit, then they will revoke the clause in the contract and do the demolition. But if the Assembly tells you that even the engineer or the workshare doesn't have a vehicle to move around, he doesn't have a team to move, if you have to go and do demolition, because some of the areas, when you get there, you meet equal resistance. People have tags who are on their lands 24/7, guiding them to do construction, even though they know they don't have permit. So the engineer at the Assembly may not just go to these areas on his own. He has to ensure that he has all the adequate, infrastructure or facilities to aid him to move. And that will come from the Assembly, that the DISEC or MUSEC or the internally generated funds, what allocation will be given to them. That's what I said, that if you have an Assembly or MMDC who are focused, their attention will move towards that area, be able to resource those works departments, and they can carry out these preventions or prohibitions or alteration or demolition. Because the alteration means that if you go to the person's land and the structure is being constructed, you have to call the person to your Assembly.
Okay.
If the person has not even been given permit, then the Assembly will find the person, go through the process with the person, and possibly alter the design to fit the area where the construction is. That's why I use the word alteration, abatement, or carry out instant demolition. In the event where they feel like the building has to go in whatever way, that's when the prohibition comes in. In the instant where they feel like they can actually alter the design so that they can still meet their purpose, then they do the alteration. In the instant where they feel like they have to do the demolition because the building has already been started, then there is demolition. But the demolition would come with a force of resistance from the people. So the Assembly has to be equipped to be able to meet the same measure of force that is coming from the the opposition side to the construction of those said facilities.
Okay, interesting. I think this is a good proposal. I hope that we can do it to ensure that we minimize the impact of flooding that should occur in the near future. Grateful to you for joining us here, Engineer Mahama. He is a building and road consultant. This is still the AM show on the Joy News channel. Now, over the weekend, there were some reports of the parts of the Kakum forest being given out for mining activities. I mean, it generated a lot of, debate on social media about whether or not part of the Kakum National Forest should be given out for mining activities. We've been checking with the Minerals Commission to find out why that decision has been taken to lease out, some part of the Kakum National Forest. I have an update for you here on the show, so do stay with us. We will return after the break with more. And again, Joy News won big at the Wameka over the weekend. Two of our colleagues won some incredible awards there. We'll be sharing their stories here on the show for you, where Kwesi Deborah has been reporting on tech issues for us on Tech Thursday, and he was adjudged the best journalist for ICT and telecoms reporting, while Francisca Enchel, who reports for Africa, I think Corruption Watch, also won the best investigative journalist. Now, they'll be telling us their story here on the show right after the break, and I'll give you an update as well on what's happening with respect to that news about some part of the Kakum forest being given out for mining activities. You would want to stay here with us here to get to know what we are picking from the Minerals Commission right after break.